ये सरजमीन है तेरी, तू इसका निगहबान है। कलेजा तुझ में, जीता तूने आसमान।
The third dimension has always fascinated us, the human race. But this dream took wings for the first time when the Wright brothers took their flying machine for a maiden flight in the early 1900s. Aviation grew rapidly. The first aeroplane soared in the Indian skies in December 1910, 7 years after the maiden flight by the Wright brothers. The journey of the Indian Air Force has been a very fascinating one. 75 years ago, a very small band of Indian pilots and airmen set out against many odds to learn to fly and form an air force. The British Imperial government had denied India an air force till this point, despite the success with which Indians had flown in the First World War. The early years were difficult, not because the pioneers were less proficient than their RAF counterpart, but owing to the prejudices that they had to overcome. Through history, it is only in the face of adversity the best in man is challenged. A handful Wapiti Westland aircraft marked the beginning days of the Indian Air Force, which saw few resources. In these times, the Air Force pilots flew with raw passion and courage, a tradition for which the Indian Air Force is now known. The Indian Air Force proved its mettle over the northwest frontier and more dramatically in the Second World War. In the history of man, there has probably never been a grimmer period when millions of innocents were killed as fascism spread. Few stood firm against this wrong. The Indian Air Force played an instrumental role in thwarting the advance of the Japanese army in Burma and northern Thailand, winning much accolade for their efforts. As the war progressed, the British started to realize the true potential of the Indian Air Force. And suddenly, relatively modern aircraft found their place in the squadrons at the front, manned by the best of Indian pilots. This war brought laurels to young Indian Air Force combatants, their valor aptly acknowledged by conferring 23 gallantry awards and later bestowing the prefix Royal upon the Indian Air Force on 12th March 1945. While India was going through the painful period of partition, the Indian Air Force's air warriors were given the task of saving the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Thousands of armed men and tribesmen from Pakistan, under cover of machine gun fire, slaughtering all habitation and pillaging houses, crossed the Indian borders. In their sights, Srinagar, the capital of Jammu and Kashmir, was a few days away. The instrument of accession was signed. The Indian Air Force airlifted the 1st Battalion of the Sikh Regiment, thus securing the airfield safety. The operations of 47-48 were unique and saw for the first time full-time deployment of transport aircraft. The Indian Army single-handedly blocked the advance of the tribal warriors and the Pakistani mercenaries. In Poonch area, despite all the difficulties and against heavy odds, Air Commodore Meher Singh created a sort of record by landing a Dakota with 3 tons of load against normal rated load of 1 ton. In a span of 6 days, number 12 Squadron, Royal Indian Air Force carried out 73 sorties, averaging more than 2 sorties per aircraft per day, carrying more than 210 tons of supplies to Poonch. Apart from airlifting operations and supplying essential commodities to the ground troops, the Indian Air Force helped evacuating the refugees and the wounded. On 31st December 1948, both nations agreed to a ceasefire proposal marking the end of hostilities. On the eve of relinquishing command of the Indian Air Force, Air Marshal Sir G.E. Gibbs, in his order of the day, says, "On December 10, 1951, I took over command of the Indian Air Force, and at midnight on March 31st, the command will pass from me to Air Marshal Mukherjee." The efforts of the Indian Air Force were suitably recognized, and in a grand military ceremony, it received its colors from Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the then President of India and the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. The 1950s saw an induction of many aircraft and weapon systems, which in hindsight seemed to be gearing up for the Indo-Pakistani War in 1965. The war tested the strength of the Indian Air Force. And true to its name, once again, the Air Force came out with flying colors. The Indian Air Force provided crucial air cover, carrying out more than 4,073 combat sorties, responding in a fast, brave, and deadly accurate manner. In a dogfight on the 3rd of September 1965, squadron leader Trevor Keeler, flying a Gnat, shot down a Pakistani Sabre jet to record the first kill, setting the pace for many more to follow. The plans of the Pakistani army were crushed by the combined power of the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force. At this time of battle, no one knew that a legend was being born. Air Marshal Arjan Singh, who consolidated the Air Force's air superiority by deep penetration attacks against enemy targets. In a span of a few years, the Indian Air Force's professional standards and capabilities were once again put to the test. On 3rd of December 1971, Pakistan went to war with India over erstwhile East Pakistan, launching simultaneous attacks over our western and eastern borders. The volatile situation in East Pakistan let the Air Force taste first blood on 22nd November 1971, 11 days before the formal declaration of war. The Nats of the 22 Squadron, based at the Dum Dum Station, Calcutta, were the lucky ones. The balloon was now certainly up. Within the first 2 weeks, the Air Force had carried out more than 4,000 sorties and provided successful air cover as the Indian Army advanced into East Pakistan. In the now historic and unforgettable Battle of Longewala, the Indian Air Force destroyed tanks and APCs in the western sector with no restraint. On 14th December 1971, Flying Officer Nirmaljeet Singh Sekhon, out of 6 Pakistani aircraft, shot down 1 Sabre aircraft and set another on fire. During the ensuing maneuvering, his aircraft was downed in the air combat. Later, he was awarded the Paramveer Chakra posthumously. In the end, India won a glorious victory, and the Indian Air Force played a pivotal role, adding yet another feather in its cap. Bangladesh was now liberated. The inclusion of the various aircraft and weapon systems marked the process of high-tech modernization of the Indian Air Force. The Indian Air Force undertook massive upgrading of its aircraft and equipments, introducing more than 20 new aircraft. The formulation of the Air Power Doctrine, APD, was a culmination of the Indian Air Force's analysis of the changed nature of warfare, where air superiority proved a critical factor in winning any war.
Scramble Mission 823.
In the summer of 1999, in a deliberate and highly organized manner, the Pakistan Army had managed to infiltrate, undetected, many hundreds of troops and special forces up to almost 10 kilometers south of the LOC, over a frontage of 200 kilometers. After some 28 years, the Indian Air Force was again to fire its guns in anger. In a period of 7 weeks, from 26 May 1999, when the first airstrikes were launched, till 12th July, when these were suspended, to allow Pakistani forces to withdraw northwards to their side of the line of control. Fighting in treacherous conditions against all odds in the icy heights of Kargil in Jammu and Kashmir, the Indian Air Force ensured that the supreme sacrifice made by their gallant soldiers did not go waste. The Indian Air Force achieved a victory over the retreating Pakistani army. The beginning of this millennium saw the nature's fury. The country was devastated by earthquakes, floods, heavy snowfalls, and a never ever heard of tsunami. These disasters did not differentiate between the military and civilian populace. Unmoved by the personal losses, the air warriors were into the cockpits of their magnificent flying machines to ensure that the nation recovers quickly. The Indian Air Force has always stood by the nation during natural and man-made disaster. Untiring and relentless efforts showcase the Indian Air Force as saviors from the sky. The Indian Air Force has established a good reputation in undertaking peacekeeping duties in support of the United Nations. Incidentally, the first mission was in Congo, nearly half a century back in 1961. Later, the Indian Air Force made substantial contribution to the peacekeeping effort in Somalia, Sudan, Sierra Leone. The Indian Air Force has not only been instrumental in guarding the borders and taking care of India's air defense, its air warriors have been setting up world records, from scaling great heights to reaching the farthest extremities of the planet.
Supalam, Malaya Shikalam, Shasya Shamalam, Vande Mataram.